everybody. Welcome, welcome. I hope all of you are having an amazing week so far and a nice little start to summer. For those of you with kids that are finishing up the school year this coming week, I hope they have a great rest of their school year and all summer plans will be enjoyable for you all. So, yesterday was my birthday, and as I started thinking about some sermons I wanted to do moving forward, I kind of surrounded myself because it was the time of my birthday, thinking of different memories from my childhood. I had the privilege of going to school in many different states, which gave me many different life experiences and cultural experiences. I went to school in Tennessee and Georgia, and I also went to school in Connecticut, and I ended up finishing or going to middle school and high school in Wisconsin. And all of those different moving experiences gave me a different perspective and a different way to process different life events that happened. I also started thinking about Sunday school and how being in multiple churches over my life has also helped me understand more of the good and bad that can come with certain religious beliefs and practices, some of the theological standpoints of some denominations that I agree with and some that I don't. And one thing that I also thought about was my Sunday school experiences. My parents were heavily involved in the church. They were both at one point just like one or two classes shy of being a licensed pastor in the First Church of God. So I grew up very much a pastor's kid for pretty much my whole life. My dad taught Sunday school. My mom was the Sunday school director or Sunday school superintendent almost everywhere that we lived. And because of that, I was constantly either in Sunday school, in youth group, teaching Sunday school, involved in vacation Bible school. And I can think back to all of the different Bible stories that we commonly teach, for kids especially. I think back to Jonah and the whale and Jesus feeding the 5,000 and Jesus walking on water and Jesus calling his disciples and the story of Samson and Delilah. And there's just so many different stories that we teach, but the way we teach them to children is quite a bit watered down. And that also led me to ask myself, why is it that we think kids can't handle what's in the Bible? Now, don't get me wrong, the Bible is not a PG book, not PG 13. Some of it's rated R, some of it's rated a little more X in some ways. And it's not necessarily all sunshine and roses. Um, and I'm not saying that everything in there is appropriate for all children to hear, but we can still teach the biblical lessons in a way that starts to give them pieces that as they get older, as they hear the same story, they start getting more and more information about it. Because if we don't allow them a chance to realize that not everything is going to be okay all the time, and sometimes you have to go through something difficult or work through something difficult to get to something you really want or something that's amazing. They go through life, and we all go through life with this set of blinders on. Like, hardship's not going to happen to us. We don't have to worry. The world is fine. Everything's going to be handed to me. Everything's going to be okay. And that's not the life that I want for our kids, and it's not the life that I want for any of us. Um, so over the summer, we're going to be looking at many different popular children's Bible stories, and we're going to be dissecting them and digging into the good and the bad of a lot of these popular stories. So that way, not only can we ourselves grow and maybe learn something we didn't quite know at one time, but we can also give our kids an opportunity to prove that they understand and can relate to things much more than we sometimes give them credit for. So today's lesson, we're going to start with the story of Noah. It's a favorite of mine, and we're going to break it down over the next few weeks. Today's portion comes from Genesis chapter 6, verses 9 through 22. It says, "This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark out of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof an opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door on the inside of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I'm going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has breath in it. Everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and stored away as food for you and for them. Noah did everything just as God commanded." So, right away, we find out that this story is indeed about a man named Noah. Okay, Noah was seen as a very righteous and blameless man, but I want to make it very clear that this does not mean that Noah was sinless in all that he did. It meant that in comparison to the rest of the earth, to the rest of the people that populated the earth, Noah and his family were seen as less corrupted by Satan's sinful wickedness and violence. Okay? Noah was an elderly man. Now, depending on what scholar you kind of read commentary about, Noah was somewhere in his 500s. I've read some that believe he was around 580. Either way, he was in his 500s. And we also need to understand that the time frame of like a year at this time was not what it really is now. But keep all of this in your mind that Noah was an elderly man, okay? He was not some young buck. He was an elderly man. Noah was seen as a person that had been able to avoid some of the ways that mankind had chose to live. Satan had his way of painting specific choices to making it appealing, to making it look less harmful to them spiritually, emotionally, mentally, to make it less harmful to everyone else, to make it look fun. And because of this, a very different type of a plague kind of ruled mankind, and it was in the form of wickedness. Noah's sons are also mentioned, and the reason that they are mentioned and are important is because God figures them into his restoration plan, for lack of a better words. He's going to use Noah's sons as the foundation to rebuild the human race. Now, we know that at the beginning of Genesis, God creates everything over the course of 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. Now, God created man and woman, later known as Adam and Eve. Eve is tempted by a serpent in the garden to eat an unidentified fruit of the Old Testament from the tree of knowledge. She does eat it, then offers it to Adam, who takes it and eats it. Then God finds out about it and says, "What are you doing?" Adam blames God for putting Eve in the garden with him. Eve blames the serpent for tempting her. And God is like, "Are you serious? You both chose to do this. I gave you one instruction." It was the fall of man from that point on with sin. We first get our real taste of how free will, unfortunately, comes at a price. If we choose incorrectly, God wants us to learn from our mistakes, but he's also going to kind of call us on it. as we should all be held accountable. So, um, the start of this sin, unfortunately, from this point on, continues to get worse and worse and worse. And in today's passage, we hear that God is deeply saddened and troubled by the violence and wickedness that are plaguing the earth. God tells Noah that he is going to judge the wicked along with judging the earth, and in doing so, God is going to destroy the earth. And if we can literally take a minute here and unpack that, let's notice and think about how deeply horrified and heartbroken God would have had to have been in order to destroy the world that he once said was good. He was so brokenhearted at what he was seeing mankind do to creation that he truly decided the only way I've got is to wipe out as much of this violence as I can, and let's start all over. In a way, think of it as a painter. I love to paint. I used to paint when I was in grad school quite a bit. I haven't done it recently. But if I came across a painting that I was working on and I absolutely hated it, all I'd have to do is cover the whole thing with white paint and start all over. And that's pretty much what God chose to do. He looked at the creation, at his artistic hand, and decided, I'm going to whitewash this and start all over. And there are many people that struggle with this. There are folks that think that God is cruel, and shouldn't have been able to do that. They think that God had too harsh of a judgment on the world and on people. Donald Barnhouse posed the question that I thought was intriguing. He says, on what grounds would God be told that he can bring death to millions of people at the end of what we see as a normal life, but that God may not do it in any other way? It's almost like we're telling God, you don't have the right. Dangerous message. Now, God wants to save Noah and his family, again, because they were seen as less sinful in comparison to everyone else. So he tells Noah to build this ark out of cypress and pitch. Now, the pitch would have waterproofed the cypress. That's what the pitch was for. The ark was going to have multiple rooms and was going to be about 3 floors high. Now, we initially hear the measurements in Scripture as a cubit, and most people are trying to figure out what a cubit even is, because nobody really uses a cubit anymore. Now, a cubit is actually 1.5 feet. So, a cubit in this, if we redo all of the conversions, the ark would have been about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. And to put that into a perspective, it would have been just slightly shorter than the average Navy destroyer. So if any of you have ever seen a Navy destroyer up close, the ark would have been just ever so slightly shorter than that. And the ark would have been designed very much like a barge, meaning that instead of it actually being able to necessarily sail, it was more designed to float. It would have had more than enough room. There are many people that think that the dimensions that are given, this boat would not have been big enough for Noah, his sons, and his sons' wives to, Noah's family to live on it, plus 2 of all the animals. Now, we have to understand that, the animals and all the animals we have now probably were not all there at this particular time. And even then, most scientists believe that the land animals at this time were smaller than the average size sheep. So almost all of the animals would have fit in about 40 to 60% of the boat. That would have left, anywhere from 40 to 60% of the boat for Noah's family as well. plus all their food, plus all their provisions and everything else they needed to survive. So this boat was indeed plenty big enough with room to spare. Not only did Noah build this ark, and he had to build it at an elderly age, but we actually have historical proof that this ark existed. This is not just a fairy tale. There is a commentator that was able to actually break down some of the examples that are out there historically. And the first one comes from 275 BC with Berosus, a Babylonian historian, who wrote, "But of this ship that grounded in Armenia, some part still remains in the mountains, and some get pitch from the ship by scraping it off." Around 75 AD, Josephus said the locals collected relics of the ark and showed them off, and still do this to this very day. In 180 AD, Theophilus of Antioch wrote, "The remains of the ark are to this day to be seen in the mountains." In 1876, a distinguished British statesman and author, Viscount James Bryce, climbed Mount Ararat and reported finding a 4-foot-long piece of hand-tooled timber at an altitude of more than 13,000 feet. During World War II, 2 pilots saw and photographed something they believed was the Ark on Mount Ararat. You can't make this stuff up. The Ark, as I said, was covered in pitch. Now, this was a waterproofing technique used and was later also told to be used in the story of Moses when his mother made a waterproof basket for him to float in. Again, the pitch is very much used to preserve the wood and to help waterproof it. So it makes entire sense to me that pieces of it are still being found today and are still preserved today. God tells Noah, "I'm going to bring floodwaters on the earth and destroy all life under the heavens. Every creature that has the breath of life in it, everything on earth will perish." Not only do we need to understand the grief and the heartache that God was feeling towards his creation, but we also need to think about what Noah had to be feeling. Noah was being told that his family would be the only ones to survive a massive flood. Noah was going to be a witness to the greatest judgment ever seen, and his family would be witness to the greatest salvation seen at this time. I can only imagine feeling relieved to know that I was going to be saved and my family was going to be saved, but also heartbroken, thinking about the fact that my close friends and extended family members were going to be killed, and I couldn't do anything to save them. Now, God does promise a new covenant with Noah. Noah and his family will be saved from the flood, and God will also use Noah to save a remnant of each animal so that the earth could be repopulated. Now, God gives instructions for Noah to take as much food as he can, because not only does his family need to survive, but he has to take care of the animals that are on the ark. Without complaining, Noah begins construction, and this ark is suggested to take anywhere from 100 to 120 years to construct. Okay, God didn't give Noah superpowers or super energy or super strength to do this in the course of a few days. Noah didn't have Black & Decker tools to help him out. He had to build it with his own bare hands. But what God did give him was time. And in this time, Noah would have been the preacher of righteousness that the world needed around him. He knew that he had to be the example to others, and even though it wasn't going to change the outcome, he had the chance to help others seek and find a new way to live life, and to maybe help them find a change in their hearts. Although God was going to destroy the earth, Noah knew he had the ability to change or help someone else see things differently without knowing exactly when his last day on earth would be. Then the question becomes, what can we take from this from Noah? How can we focus on reaching others? Because we don't know how long we have. Tomorrow is not promised. It is not a guarantee. Are we going to continue to live life in the exact same way with zero effort to heal, to change ourselves, to relearn new habits, to break old habits, to come to terms with our past and let it not define us, but move forward in the way that God built us to move forward? Or are we going to let life happen and be the reason that the world moves in a bad direction? Are we going to sit idly by, or are we going to be proactive and actually figuring something out and trying to help the world change and be better? This morning in Sunday school, the adult Sunday school class talked about worrying. And when does worrying become solely anxiety based, and when does it become more of an act of care? And I said there is a difference between worrying to the point where it's debilitating to you, and worrying in a way that causes production because you want to see something change, so you do something about it. It is not too late. Yes, God chose to flood the earth. And in his choice to flood the earth, it paints him in a different picture than what most people think of. They don't think of a loving, merciful God destroying everything. But this is just the beginning of the story. Stay tuned for next week. Everybody have a great week ahead.
Follow Mexico. Follow New Zealand. Shout out to everyone in the world. Alright, so today let's talk about my hat. No. We are gonna talk about the Holo Taco new collection that was just released yesterday. But first I want to show you guys some behind the scenes stuff that I thought was funny to share. So, do you like my hat? It does more nail art than me. It also just very nicely matches my outfit. I didn't even know, it's like the exact same blue. So, hold on, let me figure out how to share my screen. You'll have to be patient because your mother is on a